Welcome to World News TG, your trusted source for international news with speed, depth, and neutrality. We bring you a comprehensive view of the world, from wars and politics to economics and shifting global power dynamics. If you found today's report helpful, don't forget to hit the like button, share the video, and subscribe to World News TG for the latest updates from global hotspots. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a critical story that matters to you and the world.
General context and current affairs. Junin Timoloth, Zamami Pham. During this period, the Russia-Ukraine war remained tense and escalated further, with a record number of drone and missile strikes, humanitarian prisoner exchanges paired with diplomatic efforts, and significant developments on the home front. Tactically, the conflict continues to revolve around two primary axes: airspace, strategic firepower. Russia intensified aerial assaults, using both drones and missiles on civilian areas and industrial zones, particularly in Kyiv, Odesa, Kharkiv, and Sumy. Ground, long-range strikes, and territorial expansion. Reports of attacks across Dnipropetrovsk, Sumy, and various eastern and northeastern regions continue to surface. Information and logistics warfare. Beyond the front lines, the war has expanded into cyberspace, digital governance in occupied areas, and psychological operations using social media to reinforce national morale. June 9th, 2025, Youth Prisoner Exchange. On June 9th, Russia and Ukraine conducted a notable prisoner exchange involving fighters under the age of 25 at the Chernihiv border. It was one of the first humanitarian gestures since the peace conference in Istanbul on June 2nd. Emotional reunions of family and friends were seen, offering a rare glimpse of hope amid the ongoing violence. Russia's massive drone and missile attack. According to the Ukrainian Air Force, Russia launched the largest drone attack of the war overnight from June 8th to 9th, deploying 409 suicide drones, of which 460 were reportedly intercepted via electronic warfare systems. This marked a new peak in aerial aggression. As of the morning of June 9th, international media had not confirmed the full casualty toll, but Ukraine was forced to fully activate its air defense systems to cope with the overwhelming scale of the attack. Expansion of ground operations. A June 9th report from the Institute for the Study of War, ISW, confirmed that Russia deployed the elite Tang-90 missile group from the 90th Tank Division, 41st Army, to cross into Donetsk-Dnipropetrovsk, aiming to establish a buffer zone. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces struck Russian encampments in Relsk, Kursk Oblast, using HIMARS. Reports indicated damage, including the shelling of a cultural center in Prigorodnaya Slobodka that killed at least one civilian. ISW also recorded intense clashes in Sumy Oblast. While no major breakthroughs were noted, Russia appeared focused on shaping a defensive perimeter near the border. June 10th, 2025. Unprecedented drone and missile barrage. On June 10th, Russia launched a record-scale attack on Kyiv and Odesa, described as the largest in over 3 years of war. According to Reuters, over 300 drones were launched in coordination with 7 missiles, including 2 ballistic missiles reportedly sourced from North Korea. At least 3 people were killed and 13 injured. A maternity hospital in Odesa was struck, an event President Zelensky called one of the most severe attacks of the war. Kyiv reactivated its full-scale air defense operations, and civilians evacuated to metro stations. While Russia claimed to be targeting military infrastructure, Ukrainian media confirmed that numerous civilian areas were severely affected. Casualties and prisoner recovery. On the same day, Ukraine announced another prisoner exchange, about 1,200 people, many of them severely injured. One returned prisoner was reportedly branded with the phrase, "Glory to Russia," on his skin, highlighting the brutal treatment and torture endured in Russian detention camps, an alarming revelation of the war's brutality. Continued ground combat. Reuters confirmed drone strikes in the Kharkiv front, although specific damage details remain unclear. At least one person was killed and several others injured. In total, 17 drones hit 2 residential zones, killing at least 2 people and injuring 54, with multiple fires in apartment blocks. ISW reports from June 10th also noted that President Putin has intensified efforts to militarize Russian youth through initiatives like the 1st Youth Brigade and Yunarmia, preparing for prolonged warfare and increased influence. June 11th, 2025, ongoing drone attacks on Kharkiv. Overnight between June 10th and 11th, Kharkiv suffered another wave of Russian drone attacks. At least 2 people were killed and more than 54 injured. 17 drones hit 2 areas, setting fire to 15 apartment buildings. Several residents were reportedly trapped inside. Battlefield overview. Russia on the offensive. According to Russia Matters, MIT, as of June 10th, Russia had gained approximately 62 square miles, 160 kilometers, roughly equivalent to 3 Manhattans, of Ukrainian territory within a week. This marked an acceleration from the prior week's 54 square miles. Meanwhile, Ukraine continued to hold about 6 square miles, 16 kilometers squares inside Russian territory, Kursk-Belgorod, demonstrating rapid, albeit tactical, incursions. ISW warned on June 11th that any reduction in U.S. aid, especially rapid response logistics, would give Russia greater freedom to expand offensives. President Putin appears to be banking on creeping advances as a long-term strategy. Tactical and diplomatic implications. Drone missile strikes, a shift toward remote warfare. Russia's combined drone and missile assaults underline a shift in military tactics. Integration of suicide drones, Shahed, and ballistics conventional missiles, including some from North Korea. Deliberate targeting of civilian infrastructure, residences, hospitals, to exert psychological and economic pressure on the population. Despite Ukraine's robust air defenses and electronic warfare systems, damages remain significant, highlighting the need for sustained support, e.g. PAC-3 systems, broader air defense coalitions. The use of drones suggests a transition to high-mobility, long-range warfare, which complicates civilian and industrial security efforts. Ground combat. Slow but diversified tactics. Russia appears to be pursuing a slow and steady approach, carving out buffer zones near Donetsk, Dnipropetrovsk, and Sumy, though advancement remains gradual. Ukraine continues to hold its lines and launch deep, effective HIMARS strikes. Data from ISW and Russia Matters show Russia gained 62 square mi over the past week, but only 223 square mi for the entire month, a modest increase compared to long-term expansion goals. Aid and the war budget. The U.S. is considering reducing aid in early 2026, as reflected in preliminary budget drafts, indicative of internal political shifts and priorities of the new administration. NATO is pushing for a 5% GDP defense spending target ahead of the Hague summit, citing growing Russian provocations. Ukraine and logistics experts are advocating for a mass production model, focusing on practical, affordable weapons, e.g., Bodana artillery, M107 shells, rather than solely on high-end, limited-quantity systems. Back-end warfare, cultural and civilian control. Russia is consolidating control in occupied territories, Kherson, Luhansk, through propaganda, rewritten textbooks, passport mandates, and identity erasure, especially targeting children. These activities reveal Moscow's intent to wage not only a military, but also a cultural and psychological war, aimed at locking down entire regions. Summary, June 9 to 11th, 2025. 2 main theaters of war remain active. Air war. Drone and missile strikes. Russia escalated drone missile attacks on residential areas and hospitals, forcing Ukraine to shift defense tactics. Ukraine's air defenses intercepted most drones, yet the nation still suffered considerable damage. Ground war. Russia deployed armored units, e.g. 90th Tank Group, deeper into Dnipropetrovsk and towards Sumy, seeking to form a defensive belt. Ukraine responded with HIMARS strikes and maintained strong defensive positions. While Russia made gains, Ukraine held firm and carried out tactical counterattacks. Aid and war economy. U.S. and NATO face growing budgetary and political pressure. The war's outcome may hinge on future funding decisions. Ukraine is pushing for scaled-up, cost-effective arms supplies to meet the demands of a prolonged conflict. Cultural warfare and occupation control. Russia is embedding its systems, cultural, legal, and media, into occupied zones. The long-term control efforts signal Moscow's strategy of full-spectrum dominance. Outlook and recommendations. For Kyiv, expand international partnerships for layered air defense, radar systems, anti-air missiles, even from non-U.S. sources if necessary. Scale up production and deployment of high-quantity, cost-effective weapons, e.g. M107 shells, Bodana artillery, HIMARS, to meet attrition warfare demands. Overview of the situation. As of June 25, the Middle East faces the risk of multifaceted conflict manipulation. In Gaza, Israel's military campaign against Hamas continues to cause a severe humanitarian crisis. Israel-Iran relations are at a peak of tension amid threats to nuclear facilities and U.S. involvement. Armed groups like Hezbollah, the Houthis, and factions in Lebanon and Yemen act as indirect players, increasing the risk of regional spillover. 1. The Gaza conflict. As of June 11 to 12, 2025. Top 1.1. Airstrikes and civilian casualties. June 11th, an Israeli drone struck the Médecins du Monde headquarters in Khan Yunis, killing 8 civilians and injuring dozens at aid distribution points. 17 people from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation were also killed while trying to access aid zones. Infrastructure, such as hospitals, cultural centers, and sanitation facilities, has been heavily damaged, deepening the humanitarian crisis. 1.2. Losses and social impact. By mid-year, the Gaza Ministry of Health reported over 55,000 Palestinian deaths, many of them women and children. Cases of acute child malnutrition have risen sharply, with more than 2,700 new cases by the end of May. People in blockade zones are being displaced, facing extreme poverty and sanitation crises. 1.3. International reactions and diplomatic efforts. On June 12, the UN General Assembly held a non-binding vote calling for an immediate ceasefire, humanitarian access, and hostage release. The EU warned that the Palestinian banking system could collapse if Israel revokes access rights. The UK, Canada, Australia, and Norway imposed individual sanctions on far-right Israeli ministers, Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich, for inciting violence. Peace rallies were held in London, Paris, and Dublin, urging a ceasefire and humanitarian support for civilians. 1.4. Future Peace Plan. New York Conference, June 17 to 20, 2025, organized by the UN to push for a 2-week ceasefire, prisoner exchanges, and discussion of a 2-state solution. Although the U.S. opposes recognition of Palestine before negotiations, countries like Malta, Belgium, and Luxembourg are expected to proceed after the conference. 2. Israel-Iran tensions. 2.1. Nuclear threats. Reports state Israel has informed the U.S. that it is fully prepared to strike Iranian nuclear facilities if necessary. Iran has warned of retaliation, potentially targeting U.S. bases in Iraq. 2.2. U.S. military adjustments. According to the Washington Post, the U.S. has evacuated non-essential personnel, including military families and embassy staff, from parts of the Middle East. Former President Trump stated, "I'm less optimistic about a deal," and emphasized that Iran must not be allowed to acquire nuclear weapons. 2.3. Strengthening the axis of resistance. ISW and CTP report Iran is enhancing coordination with Hamas and Hezbollah, using Syria as a conduit for weapons and intelligence. Tehran is also increasing pressure via the IAEA and international forums to counter nuclear weapons allegations. 3. Link between Gaza and Iran. 3.1. Iran's role in Gaza diplomacy. According to Reuters, Iran has participated in negotiations with the U.S., Israel, and Hamas for a 60-day ceasefire, involving the release of 28 hostages by Israel in exchange for 1,236 Palestinian detainees. Strategically, if Israel attacks Iran, Hamas may escalate its operations in Gaza. 3.2. Spillover risks. Hezbollah and the Houthis. Israel has intensified attacks in Lebanon targeting Hezbollah, potentially a pretext for a prolonged campaign. On the southern front, the Houthis in Yemen fired missiles at Jerusalem and were countered by the Israeli Navy. 4. Escalation strategy, a critical moment. 4.1. Israel's dual approach, military and political. Militarily, airstrikes have intensified in Gaza, with tunnel systems, e.g. under Khan Yunis Hospital, destroyed. Plans to strike Iran are reportedly all or nothing. Politically, internal divisions over conscription and Gaza policy are shaking the Knesset. Netanyahu faces mounting opposition pressure. 4.2. Iran's leverage and psychological strategy. Iran is maximizing tensions to gain negotiating power in nuclear talks. If attacked, it promises widespread retaliation, forcing the U.S. to tread carefully. Nuclear talks continue via the Doha-Oman channel, although the U.S. admits a deal remains distant. 5. Conclusion and outlook. In Gaza, Israel's military operations continue to inflict heavy casualties and destroy infrastructure. International pressure is escalating. The UN is pushing for a ceasefire. Sanctions target far-right Israeli figures, and the New York Peace Summit aims to revive a peace framework. Israel-Iran. Tensions are at their highest in years. Israel is ready to strike, the U.S. is scaling back presence, and Iran threatens full-scale retaliation. Continued conflict risks dragging the entire region, from Lebanon to Yemen and Iraq, into chaos. Urgent recommendations. 1. For Gaza civilians. Maintain emergency aid efforts and protect civilians and medical infrastructure under international supervision. 2. For Israel. Scale back civilian airstrikes, engage seriously in peace talks, and prioritize hostage releases to ease global pressure. 3. For the U.S. and EU. Implement multilateral interventions to prevent escalation toward Iran. The U.S. should protect its personnel while engaging in tension mediation talks. 4. For Iran. If it seeks influence in international policy, it must genuinely participate in Gaza and nuclear negotiations to avoid uncontrollable crisis escalation. Quick summary. Aspect key development. Gaza. Dozens of civilians killed in airstrikes. Aid sites targeted. UN calls for ceasefire. Sanctions imposed on Israeli leaders. Israel-Iran. Israel ready to strike. U.S. cautious. Iran threatens retaliation. Nuclear talks stalled. Regional impact. Hezbollah and Houthis involved indirectly. Risk of full-scale regional war increasing. Peace prospects, UN summit, June 17. Need for intermediary-led reconciliation framework to prevent collapse.
Thanks for watching. See you in the next edition of World News TG, connecting you to the world with facts, insight, and clarity.